Thanks for spending a little bit of time with material management. We're going to quickly walk through some of our procurement to payment applications. I'm just going to walk through some of the core applications. The first thing we're going to look at here is material identification. We're going to talk about the ordering process, how Power Order consumes the vendor purchase order acknowledgements, how you can load that into your ERP, what does receiving mean for you, and ultimately, how do we pay the invoice? Once that basic process is done, then what are the analytics that I have available to me in order to see that? So I'm going to jump right into it. So the first part of any procurement to payment process is identifying the things that you want to identify. This is easier said than done. You have a lot of different ways that people identify material out in the field. Let's take a look at one of the ways. The first thing that we have here is we have something called Quick Buy, which is, again, made on a phone. It's adaptive responsive on a web page. So as long as the user has internet, they're able to access these different different tools here. You can do what we call a Quick Buy, which is just a couple of buttons for a click. So when a guy drives up in a truck, walks into a supply house and says, hey man, I need stuff, and he can whip out a PO number and he can give that purchase order number, and a few minutes later, everything that he bought actually shows up, and we'll see exactly what that looks like in a moment. We can also do requisitions. Now again, the requisitions, these are meant to be as simple as humanly possible, where you limit the amount of data or the amount of options and items that somebody actually has available to them. If you've got 4 million items, that's 3.9 million opportunities to mess up the order. That's too much information for the average field guy. So if I go in here and I create a purchase or create a requisition, in this case right here, I've already selected the 1900 box from Rayco. I do need to specify my job. And if I'm a field guy, I don't need to specify my vendor. I can also use items that are not on the catalog. So if I've got things in here that are not on the catalog, but then I can also go in here and look for, say, a set screw connector, and there's a lot of different things that I can do, and those things will be all here in the drop-down list based off of either what I buy or based off of the items that I have available to me in the boxes. So this is just any old catalog that you want to use. We can give you something with 4 million parts. It gets a little complicated. Otherwise, we'll just give you something that your vendors will do. I can then, after I've created this requisition, I can send it to purchasing. If I want to, I can also upload a photo of guys with a piece of cardboard that's drawn on it, or I can import from Excel and it'll auto-populate everything that's in here. So a lot of different options and power with the requisition. Once I've created the requisition, a purchasing manager can review it. They can make the decision of what vendor they want to send this to. So they'll select a vendor. And again, your vendors and your jobs can be tied in with your ERP. So there's no surprises there. And then I can finally issue the purchase order. This will generate the purchase order and send the items off. These can be priced or unpriced. That's a whole discussion unto itself right there. Once this gets to a vendor, the vendor is going to send back the purchase order acknowledgement. The purchase order acknowledgement is then going to be processed typically by somebody in the back office. So the look and the feel's a little bit different, a little bit more sophisticated. But here's all of the items that I bought, whether it's a guy who drives up in a truck, whether it's somebody who makes a requisition and sends that requisition across. Here's all of the items, because the requisition is a wish list. That wish list gets translated into the actual description from the vendor, the actual UPC, a vendor item code, catalog number, price, quantity, and description. If I want to get this over to my ERP, there's a couple of pieces of information that the vendor isn't going to know: cost code, phase code, GL. Once I've perfected this information here, I send it off to the accounting system. Every accounting system works a little bit different. I'm showing Spectrum on the screen right here. I'm going to import my purchase orders. So I'm going to take a file that the system generates, load it in there. Some are going to have APIs, and then it just loads in via API. Now, the next piece is here. So what happens when I've ordered material and now it's being readied on a truck for delivery? I can go in here to the receiving application, And again, this is designed to be field focused, so it's very simple in terms of its nature. And I can see, hey, for this purchase order right here, I'm going to get 1,000 foot of 3/4 inch conduit. I'm also going to, on this one right here, hey, this is a square D order for a bunch of panel stuff. And so these are the things that I'm expected to receive. This will consume the advanced shipment notification. So if we get the shipment notification, it'll be present here and it'll give you a ship date on it. Otherwise, though, you have all of the items exactly as what came back on the purchase order. So you're not relying on the requisition, you're relying on the actual accepted data of what that user actually, or what the vendor is actually telling you is going to be on the truck, along with useful information. And I can either receive all, I can receive some, and let's say, hey, I got 10 of them today, so that means I've got 20 left to receive. Or I can say, hey, we have a problem, and I can take a photograph of the problem and send it back to purchasing. I can also upload a copy of my packing slip. Now, the final piece to this is, so I want to be able to do an invoice. We can tie in receiving to the invoices. However, sometimes that's a more difficult problem. So here's the example of what an invoice looks like. I'll go into the Power Invoice application. Again, this is meant for the back office team. They're going to select invoices that they want to process, and then all of the information from the invoice is going to appear here on the screen. The machine is going to read in the purchase order. The machine is going to read in the invoice, and it's going to attempt to match. So in this case right here, this purchase order has many, many items. This invoice only has 2 items. So it matched line 3 and it performed its test: quantity, price, extension, tax. So it has validated this line. But this line right here didn't get validated because the quantity on the invoice was wrong. The price was wrong. Therefore, the extension was wrong. Well, I got the tax code right. Either way, though, I now know what's wrong with this invoice. If everything is correct with the invoice, you can just process the invoice and move on. If there's a problem, you know where the problem exists, and now you can take the steps to fix it. And there's a lot of things that you can do from a fixing it standpoint, but the main thing is that now you no longer have to do the brute force stare and compare that AP teams have typically had to do, because you're dealing with detailed items on the purchase order and you're getting a detailed items-based invoice. If you can't get the purchase order correct, you can't have any chance of getting any of the rest of this information correct either. So material management attempts to get all of the different aspects of it correct so that you can do less work. So by automation, by getting complete information, making sure that everything is there so that it's visible on the screen, it's transparent, and the workflow is a lot easier. And we're trying to get you so that you have a 98% approval flow through. We even have an automated function that you may not even need to look at this. If the invoice matches the purchase order, you don't even need to look at it. Just say, yep, I accept it. Off to the ERP it goes. And again, the ERPs, every ERP is going to be a little bit different. With Spectrum, this is mostly going to be the purchase order receiving import, so that it receives the committed cost, or it receives against the committed cost that's in the purchase order. Very powerful tool there. The final piece in all of this is, how do we use this data to be useful? So that we have a series of reports that these are canned reports, but these are based off of the data that you have available to you that has come through material management. And you can actually see a whole bunch of different data in here. This is an item find. So I wanted to find on this job, how much PVC did I buy? Well, here's how much PVC I bought on that particular job. We can also expand this out to add vendors. There's a lot of different things that you can expand out on here, but the most important thing here is that now you have some analysis on there, and you can say, hey, I want to know how much did I spend on any given thing, and I can type in a job number, and then I can search for a certain date range, and then ultimately I can get a result out of the system, and that result is going to be useful data that I will then be able to go in here and run, and I'm just going to run this for a few days and see if maybe I chose correctly. Looks like I got something. And so for this given job right here that I picked up there by job number, here are all of the items that I bought this week down to the detailed UPC level. You can also have an item code, a lot of different things you can do with this. More importantly, I can export this data. Material management does not cloud cuff you so that you are tied with our tools. If you want to export this data and you want to put it into your own BI systems, you can. So that's a brief look at everything for the material identification, the ordering piece, getting it into the ERP. How can I receive and make sure I get these items? How can I process the invoice? And then ultimately, what is the benefit of the data? For every $10 million in spend, we say that we save you the man-hour equivalents of about 2 bodies for FTE, and we can also help you get to that 2% cash discount. And some of your vendors are offering a discount if we start sending them electronic purchase orders. So all of those things can be possible with the material management procurement to payment process. Hey, thanks for the time.